We're continuing on Mesechet Avodah Zarah, and we are on Daf Samich, Amud Bet, in the middle of the Amud. We're going to go back and discuss the beginning of the Gemara as well. Today's Amud is being learned. L'schut Rufa Shalama of Rachel Simcha bat Nahid and Moshe ben Miriam. We started the Mishnah on the Amud, and the Gemara really has a psak from Shmuel that what we mentioned in the Mishnah, that a Jew that's working together with a goy, and a goy is found next to the wine pit of the Jew, the wine becomes asur, is only if the Jew owes money to the goy in such way that the goy feels confident and comfortable to touch the wine of the Jew, because even if he's caught red-handed, he's got to say, well, I owe this, I own this, you owe me money, and therefore I have the rights to touch the wine. Whereas if he doesn't owe him anything, if the Jew does not owe money to the goy, then the goy is going to be very careful before he thinks to touch the wine, because if the Jew sees him and catches him, then he's going to be in trouble. And Shmuel said, Vehu sheyesh lo milveh al oto yain. Shmuel said, it's not only any debt of money that would cause this. Even if the Jew owes money to the Oved Kochavim, the goy is still not going to feel comfortable touching the wine unless the debt is a lien on the wine itself. If the goy has a lien on the Jewish wine and the wine that the Jew has, then he feels comfortable touching it, because even if the Jew sees him, he's going to say, well, this is mine, or I have a lien on it, and you haven't paid me up, so therefore I'm touching it. But if the Jew owes money for other things to the Oved Kochavim, the goy is still not going to touch it. Says the Gemara, how do I know that? Amaravashi matnitin lamidaika. The next Mishnah, the upcoming Mishnah in Daf Samech Aleph, is really a source for this psak of the Shmuel as well. You see it in the Mishnah. How do you see it in the Mishnah? Ditran, because we learned if you have a partnership between a goy and a Jew in production of wine, so the Jew is producing kosher wine. That means that he's doing everything, but really financially everything belongs to the Oved Kochavim. He's just not allowed to touch it because the wine is not going to be kosher if he touches it. So the Jew wants to produce kosher wine, and he has to keep the goy away from touching it, but financially everything belongs to the goy. So what do? You're also storing it in the storage house of the Oved Kochavim. Everything is sealed, everything is closed, he's not allowed to touch it, but you're putting it there. Now we have to deal with the hashgacha pratit and hashgacha tmidit, right? Hashgacha pratit, hashgacha tmidit. We have to talk about that in the upcoming Mishnayot, but says the Gemara, V'alo kotev lo hitkabalti, and the goy, in order to facilitate this, he writes a document and he says, you paid me to the last penny for this wine, even though that he hasn't paid him a penny. But the goy provides a document for the Jew, says, I am as if I accepted the money on the wine. Now he still owes him, let's call it, if the amount is $1,000, he still owes him $1,000, but he has a document that he owes him nothing on the wine. So says the Mishnah, listen to what happens now.
Why would that happen? In what situation would you sign a document saying that someone paid you when they didn't actually pay you?
You could do any of these things. You could also write an IOU star, right, and be mechayev yourself. You could say, I owe you $1,000. Even though that you have never borrowed a penny from me, now you're halachically obligated to pay me $1,000. Right? So he wants to clarify the wine situation. So he writes, Hareni keilu hitkabalti, I accepted the payment from you as if you paid me to the last penny for the wine, so therefore you owe me nothing on this wine that's in my storage house. So says the Gemara, V'alo kotev lo hitkabalti bimecha ma'ot mutar. then it's mutar. Aval im yirtze Yisraeli otzio ve'eno manicho. But if the Jew wants to take now the wine out of the storage house of the goy before he has paid him the $1,000 or whatever he owes him, and the goy doesn't let him, he is basically taking the wine, keeping the wine as a guarantor for the payment. Like he has a lien on it. Until you pay me the money. This was actually a story that happened. So he has a lien on this wine. He's not letting the Jew take the wine out until he pays, even though that he wrote for him that it's as if I accepted it and your debt to me is from somewhere else, not from the wine. But if he is holding the wine and as a collateral, so to speak, and he has a lien on it, this actually happened in the city of Bet Shan, ve'asaru, and they said it's asur. The wine is asur because we assume that the goy may have touched it. So says the Gemara, let's explore this. The reason that in Beit Shan they paskin this halacha, this case, that it is asur is because the goy was holding the wine as collateral in order to receive payment from the Jew. Hamanicho shari. But if he would allow him to take the wine out, he would not hold the wine as collateral and as a lien for his payment, then it would be mutar. Even though that the Yid still owes him $1,000, he has to pay him after he sells the wine, but the goy is dealing with this payment, with this debt, as a debt that stamazeh exists without a lien on the wine. That would be mutar. So in both scenarios, the Jew owes the same $1,000 to the Oved Kochavim. And in one case, the wine would be mutar. In the other case, the wine would be asur. What's the difference? Says the Gemara, Shmamina, you see the halacha of Shmuel from this Mishnah. Shmamina, milve al oto yayin ba'inan shmamina. You see that the only case that the wine becomes asur if the goy is standing next to the pit of your wine is when you owe him money on this wine. He has a lien. His debt is related to this wine. If the debt stamazeh exists, you owe him $1,000 for some other business deal, that does not let him psychologically to touch your wine, and he would not be comfortable doing that lest you would see and you would catch him.
If let's say it's on the same wine, would he be able to just tell him, okay, fine, it's your collateral, take the wine? He has on a higher, he's paying him back. But it's his collateral.
Yeah, he could. He doesn't want to because he could sell it as kosher wine and gain more money.
He already touched it.
Well, if he
could he take it back? The guy could take it back, and then he.
So that would be a financial dispute between them, whether or not, depending on what their upmacht has been, depending on what their initial agreement has been. That would be a din Torah for them. But forget about that. The question is, I want to know if this wine is kosher. Well, the goy says I didn't touch it. The Yid said nobody touched it, but we are concerned that he had touched it because he was in his domain. Right? The wine was alone with this goy, and we want to know. Now we're going to discuss what scenarios the wine would be kasher if it's alone with a goy. What scenarios is not? That's going to be the entire next Mishnah, right? We're going to step into that sugya and that realm very soon. But for this, we are discussing that if a goy feels comfortable touching the wine of a Jew because he owns part of this wine, he has a lien on this wine, then we are concerned that he would actually touch it with comfort without being afraid of the Jew seeing him, because even if you catch him and say, what do you mean? It's mine. I have a lien on this wine. He would be comfortable saying that, so you haven't paid me yet. But if the Jew owes him money for other business dealings, the goy would not feel comfortable like that. That's the halacha of Shmuel, and the Gemara says you see that really from proper analysis of the next Mishnah. Okay? Next piece in the Gemara. Nafal leborvala. We mentioned the Mishnah that if the goy himself fell into the pit of wine and he came out, and we explained in the Mishnah that this is not a case that he actually climbed out or was saved alive, this means that they took his body out, he was dead, right? And in that case, it's mutar. Why? Says the Gemara. Why only dead? Amar Papa, lo shanu ela sh'ala mit. The only case that's mutar the wine afterwards is when he came up dead, and he was brought out. Why? But ala chai asur. If he came out alive, the wine would be asur. Why? My tama. Amar Papa, the dami alekium edam, because he's going to be so excited that he was saved from this potential death, that when he comes, it's a day that his life was saved. Like in Brachot, if you have a makom shenasu nisim la'avotenu, if you have a place that a miracle happened to you and your life was saved, every time you get to that place, you have to make a bracha. So this becomes like the day that his life was saved. And of course, when he comes up, he has a wine right over here. Why wouldn't he do some nisuch over there, right? It becomes like Yom Edam, that in the beginning of the Mesechet, we mentioned that by Yom Edam, you for sure are concerned that they do Avodah Zarah, and therefore it would be a problem. The next piece in the Mishnah was Medado Bekaneh. If the goy measured the wine, the pit of wine of a yid with a stick, even though they didn't touch it directly, we said in the Mishnah, Kol elu haya ma'aseh v'amru yimacher. All of these things, the Mishnah said, was actually cases that happened, and the psak that we got was mutar be'hana'ah. You could sell them, but you cannot drink them. And Rabbi Shimon was even more mekel. Rabbi Shimon said you could actually drink them as well. Amar Avodah Zarah, Yanuchu lo Rabbi Shimon brachot al rosho. He gives him a bracha. Avodah Zarah was, we spoke about this in Mesechet Brachot Daf Chaf. Avodah Zarah was a chassid, was a tremendous person, and the pasuk in Mishlei says, Zecher tzadik livracha. Whenever you mention a tzadik, you should mention them with bracha. That's the whole source of saying zatzal, right? Or zal. Right? The Ran actually is very careful. Whenever he mentions one of the earlier Rishonim than himself, the Ran in the back of the Masechta, he says, Harambam, Zichron Rivacha. Right? Because of this pasuk of Zecher Tzadik Rivacha. So he mentions Rabbi Shimon, he says, a praise for him, Yanuchu Barachot al Rosho. Right? Blessed shall be Rabbi Shimon. And he says, whenever he's matir legamri. He is more of a kitzoni psak. Says the Gemara, Avodah Zarah says, Yaruchu lo Rabbi Shimon brachot al rosho. He should be blessed. Kashu matir afilu b'shtia. When he is matir, he allows it even for drinking. And when he is machmir, kashu oser afilu ba'ana. There's no middle ground in Rabbi Shimon. What's the reason, by the way, for this? The reason is the way he understands stam yenam versus chachamim. There are two competing issues with wine of a goy. One is the simple understanding of the sugya that we had in the Mishnah, starting from the Mishnah in Daf Lamed Hey through Lamed Chet, of all of the food that comes from of the kochavim, from goyim, right? Bishul akum, pat akum, shemen akum, yenam shel akum. And the Gemara there said the gezerah has a hierarchy. They answered the lower levels of food because of gezerah mishum yenam and veyenam mishum benoteim. Because when you have intoxicating beverages with a guy, next thing you know, he's going to be offering his daughter to you, and you're printing invitations for wedding. That's the chashash. That's one area of isur for yain, and the other area of isur is for avodat kochavim, because yain was one of the main drinks, and one of the major ways of showing respect to avodah zarah was, pouring some wine in front of it or for its kavod. So therefore, that's another thing, that when you live with the kochavim that do these types of rituals, you have to be mindful that if the wine of the goy is there, or the goy touched your wine, that's going to be a problem. Now, Rabbi Shimon holds that this whole thing of chashash of yain nesech is only for the wine of a goy. It's not for the wine that I have and the goy touched. Therefore, the wine that I have, if it's my wine, it's either going to be mutar b'shtia also, because nothing happened. Because if he touches my wine, nothing happened. It's only his wine that I have to be concerned, not when he touches my wine. So if he touches it, I could even drink it, no problem with that. If there's no chashash of real nesech. And when it's asur, it's going to be asur ba'ana, because then I'm directly concerned about not just benotehim, but I'm concerned about yain nesech, which is tikrovet avodah zarah, which is going to be asur ba'ana. So it's very black and white in the mind of Rabbi Shimon. But Chachamim who argue with Rabbi Shimon, they hold that the chashash of yain nesech applies even if he touches my wine, right? So therefore, but if I don't know if he had kavara for nesech, so then you have this middle ground that's going to be asur be-shtia, but it's going to be mutar behana. So therefore, you have this middle ground in Rabbi Shimon, in Chachamim versus Rabbi Shimon. So it says the Gemara, Amar Avodah Zarah, Yanuchu lo Rabbi Shimon berachot al rosho. Kshu matir afilu b'shtia, kshu oser afilu ba'ana. So what's the halacha? Amar Rabchia b'red the Abba bar Nachmani, Amar Rav, Chista, Amar Rav. He said it in a chain of command, eventually in the name of Rav, ve'amrila, and there are those who say the chain of command was a little different. Amar Rav Chista, Amar Zeiri, halacha ki Rabbi Shimon. They hold halacha is like Rabbi Shimon actually. But ikade amri, but there are those who say Amar Rav Chista, Amar li Abba bar Chanan, hachi Amar Zeiri, halacha ki Rabbi Shimon. Right? It's a little bit different how the chain of command was. And the halacha, the Gemara says, don't get very excited. Ein halacha ki Rabbi Shimon. Halacha is not like Rabbi Shimon. Halacha is like Chachamim over here. That you have the middle ground of many cases that would be asur b'shtia and mutar b'hana'ah, as we have been discussing all along. Right?
Who gets to decide what the halacha is?
The Gemara. Well, the Gemara, this means that the Gemara discussed this, and Rav Ashi and Ravina, who are Chatimat Talmud, are writing the Gemara. They're telling you the halacha is based on majority, not like Rabbi Shimon, but the halacha is like a Rabbanan. Now, the truth of the matter is, in rov places, aside from Mesechet Shabbat and Mesechet Eruvin, halacha is not like Rabbi Shimon in most cases, right? A majority of the machlokets that Rabbi Shimon has with his friends, the halacha is not like Rabbi Shimon. In Mesechet Shabbat, halacha is like Rabbi Shimon. It needs explanation why exactly. This is one of the only things that you find in one area of halacha is like him. In other area of Shabbat and Eruvin is really one package. In other areas of halacha is not like him. You know, whether or not that has to do with the story of Rabbi Shimon in Mesechet Shabbat of Lamed Gimel remains to be discussed later. But nevertheless, here is Chachamim and Rabbi Shimon. Halacha is like Chachamim, that you have a middle stage, that if the goy touches your wine, you could have actually a scenario in which the wine is asur b'shtia, but mutar b'hana. Okay? Says the Gemara. The next and last piece of the Mishnah was, if a goy threw a barrel of wine in his wrath and anger, he threw the thing into a larger container of wine, into the pit, so to speak, of wine, is mutar. And that, the Mishnah said, is mutar according to everybody. Mutar b'shtia. Chachamim also agree with Rabbi Shimon over here. So it says the Gemara, Amar Rabashi. Rabashi said, Kol shebezav tameh, anything that zav would be metameh, Oved Kochavim makes yain nesech. You need a little preface for this. A zav is considered av hatuma, right? You explain this in other masechtot. A little chazara is always good. Zav is av hatuma. So if he touches even adam vekeli, which normally do not become tameh, they become tameh with a touch of a zav, and they become rishon letuma. Right? Not only that, zav is even metameh beheset. That means if a zav is holding a stick in his hand and he moves a person with it, or moves a kli with it, that person or kli becomes tameh, even though that he didn't touch the zav at all. Right? But he moved it and is metameh beheset. Right? It's metameh beheset. So Says the Gemara, Rav Ashi said, anything that Zav makes Tameh, Goy makes Yain Nesech. Now, this is not a foolproof statement, because you have things by Zav that you don't necessarily have by a Goy making Yain Nesech. We mentioned already before that if a Goy carries a full full pouch of a leather pouch of wine, it does not become nesech, either because it's not see-through or because it's not derech nisuch bekach when you're walking, right? So we mentioned, but if a zav would be carrying that, for sure it would become tameh, because it's tumat hes, he's carrying it, right? He's moving it. So it's not a foolproof comment, but nevertheless, it holds true in most cases. Says the Gemara, anything that the zav would be tahor by oved kochavim would not make yain nesech either. So the Gemara says, asks a question on this Rav Ashi. Itve Rav Huna Rav Ashi. Rav Huna asks Rav Ashi, Nata letechavit v'zraka b'chamato lebor. We brought this whole thing in order to ask a question from our Mishnah. Because what does our Mishnah say? If a goy got excited and took this in his anger and threw it into the pit of wine, we said it's mutar. Which would indicate what? And the Gemara says, Bechamato in, shelo bechamato lo. Only if he's angry and he does this is mutar. It's mashma that if he was not angry, he would just take it, move it, and throw it into the pit. That would be asur in that case, right? So you're telling me that anything that is for zav is correct in the halachot of yain nesech as well. But you see that zarak ovet kochavim, if the goy throws this wine, he make a yain nesech if he's not angry. But by zav, the halacha is, as we're going to learn, if a zav throws something at me. So we mentioned that if he moves me with a stick, I become tameh because of hesed. How about if he throws something at me and I fall? Right? So he moved me, right? But not directly. Then the halacha is, I'm tahor, no problem. Why? Because he makes the stick or the stone, whatever it is that he threw at me, he makes that rishon letumah, and that cannot make a rishon letumah, cannot make adam vekeli tameh. Right? So if he's not holding on to it, throwing does not make me tameh. Right? So by a zav, throwing does not make anything tameh. But by a akum, by a ovet kochavim, we are saying that if he throws the small barrel of wine into the pit of wine, it does make yain nesech. So what's the pshat? So says the Gemara, no, that's not the question at all. Hatam the kazil mineu mineh. That's because rolling it down. In other words, it's not the case that he took the barrel and tossed it into the pit, but rather he is rolling it down and gets to the pit and then dumps it into the pit. So if he's angry, a person that's angry, he wants to manifest his anger. And that's exactly why the Mishnah mentions anger, because when he's angry, what does he do? He doesn't drop it gently inside. He throws it in, and that's exactly what we want, because throwing does nothing, exactly like Zav. And when he throws, does he touch the wine? No, because that's the nature of throwing. You're doing it from far. But if he's not angry, how does he dump the barrel inside the pit? He rolls it gently next to it, and then when he gets on top of the pit, he gently puts it in. He's like inches or millimeters away from the wine in the pit, and we are very concerned that he actually may have touched the wine. That's the whole problem, not because of the throwing. And that's why it says bechamato, with his anger, because when he's angry, he throws it, and we know for sure he didn't touch anything. And throwing does nothing, exactly like what Rav Ashi said, that it's a parallel halakha with the halachot of Zav. Fine. Let's start the next Mishnah a little bit. We started seeing this Mishnah yesterday and today. If a Jew trying to produce wine that's going to be kosher, kosher Pesach, kosher for Jews, and he puts it in the storage house of the goy, and beto patuach l'reshut harabim. Now, because this Mishnah entirely is dedicated to discussing wine that has been alone with a goy, right? Does it become asur? Does it become mutar? Are we concerned that he may have touched it? He may have shaken it, right? So it says the Gemara, the Mishnah, ubeto patuach l'reshut harabim. If his house is open to reshut harabim, in a city that there are Jews also available, not just goyim, in a neighborhood that every 5 minutes a Jew is passing by, and the house is open, like this barrel is put in the front lawn shed of the goy. So if he wants to go touch it, it's exposed to the Reshut Harabim, and everyone, and a Jew could be walking, the rabbi could be biking in the morning and sees what he's doing. So it says the Gemara, mutar, then it's mutar. Be'ir shekula of the kochavim, but it is in a city that all of it is, the neighborhood that all of it is of the kochavim, then it's asur. In that case, it's got to be asur ad yeshev umeshamer, or according to different girsa, yashiv meshamer, right? Either he is sitting and watch it, or he appoints somebody to watch it. Ve'ein hashomer sarich liot yoshev umeshamer, and the mashgiach that's going to watch this in a goyish neighborhood does not have to be a mashgiach temidi, says the Mishnah. Does not have to be sitting and watching it with binoculars all day long. As long as he is constantly in and out, and every given second he could just pop out, and the goy would not know. So the goy would actually think twice. He would not want to mess his investment over here, and he's afraid that the yid is going to show up at any given second. Mutar, it's going to be mutar. And Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, Reshut of the kochavim achati. So it says the Reshut of Oved Kochavim is one. Is this considered the same? We'll see in the Gemara. This is a little complicated. There are two ways to learn this. If it's question form or a regular sentence and explanation of both of the ways of learning this Mishnah, which Be'ezrat Hashem we will continue in the days to come.